So let me know when you're recording.
It's recording.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Textbook Commission meeting. We're going to start with a roll call to establish if we have quorum before we can start conducting business. So Dr. Fair, if you can do that for me at this time.
Commissioner Laura Austin. Commissioner Jody Autry is present. She does not have her voice, but she has typed in a message in the chat pane to let me know that she is present. Commissioner Kelly Browning. Commissioner William Cheshire. Commissioner Edward Coggins.
Commissioner Coggins present.
Commissioner Hannah Cook.
Commissioner Cook present.
Commissioner Angela Flowers.
Commissioner Flowers present.
Commissioner Audrey Cadell. Commissioner Don Esther. Commissioner Hannah Jimenez. Commissioner Renee Kimball. Commissioner Kathleen Linker.
Commissioner Linker present.
Commissioner Susan Mills.
Commissioner Mills present.
Commissioner Lynn Moody. Commissioner Stephen Parker.
Commissioner Parker present.
Commissioner Michelle Perry.
Commissioner Michelle Perry present.
Commissioner Kim Robertson. Commissioner Nardi Rutin.
Commissioner Roughton present.
Commissioner Lindsay Sice. Commissioner Lindsay Sice.
Commissioner Sice present.
Commissioner Roslyn Yaris.
Dr. Fair, are you still there?
Yes, I was checking the other attendee list. I have
Okay, so I'm really quiet.
I have 10 commissioners that are present. Is that correct?
That's what I have. And I know that Austin was on the phone. But she hasn't answered text messages, so I can't verify if she's still on the phone or not, if she can still hear. Hold on a second. Commissioner Austin, can you hear? Can you try to see if you can, if you see her, Commissioner Dr. Fair, if you can unmute her? She indicates that she's listening, but she's muted.
She's not muted in.
Commissioner Austin here.
So that gives us 11,
Yes.
which we have to have
12.
12 to have quorum.
Mm-hmm.
So this time we don't have quorum,
That's correct.
and we're 30 minutes in. I really don't know that we can wait anymore. I would say, you know, of course, given the state of emergency that we're in and the number of commissioners that work in the school systems that have been pulled to do other things at the last minute, even as late as 8:30 this morning, is going to probably keep us from being able to hold this meeting because we have to have quorum in order to do the business of the commission. And so at this time, we're just going to have to reschedule it. We'll send out some possible dates. Our next official meeting, which will be virtual, we know that. Currently will be April the 17th. While we are waiting to get information, I would look through the folder, see if you have any questions, especially about the virtual meetings, because we didn't really get into that before. We didn't think we were going to have that option this year. So with that, Dr. Fair, I guess we just close the meeting because we can't make any motions or do anything official if we don't have quorum, correct?
That's correct. You cannot conduct business as the commission without quorum.
Okay. So this time, I guess we end this meeting and be looking for communication as we try to scramble to get another meeting before the 17th. Because we have the content people, we really need to get that information to the commission members. Does anyone have any questions? Not that we can conduct business at this time, but is everybody clear on the steps?
Commissioner Space, I understand.
Commissioner Flowers, I do.
Commissioner Cook, I understand.
Commissioner Parker, I understand.
Commissioner Roughton, I understand.
Commissioner Austin, all is clear.
Commissioner Coggins, I've got it.
Commissioner Linker, Commissioner Aubrey Gadet, I see his name on. I'm trying to see if he can unmute himself. I've tried to unmute him, but he's still muted. So
We don't have to say anything. Huh? Or do we? I do understand. I don't know. Are we good to go?
Say, Commissioner Sykes, it says that there are 20 people attending the meeting. Is that not?
That includes DPI members.
Okay to go?
Gotcha. Okay.
Commissioner Gadet, if you can hear me, raise your hand. I'm looking at your mic and it's grayed out. I'm not able to unmute you. Okay, Commissioner Gadet has raised his hand indicating that he can hear me. If you would,
So that was 12.
if you can type into the chat pane just to let me know that you're here, that would be great. Okay, so Commissioner Gadet has responded. So his presence would give you 12 commission members.
Okay, then we're set that we can continue with the meeting.
Yes.
So let me just start by saying no one can log off.
Give me 1 minute, Commissioner Linker, please.
Okay.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so officially no one can log off because we just do have quorum. So if anybody leaves, then we don't have quorum. Unless some other people jump in. I do know there's a couple commissioners that as their meetings that they were called to end, if they end in time, they're going to try to jump on board. So we may have to do another roll call later if we see people showing back up that haven't been on now. So with that said, let's get started with the business of the commission. Before we start the actual approval of minutes, just take a second. If you haven't already looked at it's called, we had it in our think of the textbook commission virtual meeting best practices. I guess the main thing in that is one, it is still a meeting. And so when we have votes and stuff, things, we do need to hear your voice, or if you can't speak and we can't hear you, you need to indicate it in the chat box so that it can be recorded. that's the way that they can verify that we're all actively participating, that we do have quorum. Of course, best practices would be that this is not going to be a time that you can really multitask. I know we're all trying to do 2,000 things or more at one time, given the state that we're in currently, but we need to focus to the meeting and be present within the meeting, making comments if needed, questions. There'll be times for the panelists, for the DPI consultants will take questions after their individual little presentations. So, if you have any questions, this would be the time for you to ask the ladies while they're presenting to us the information on the content areas that we're going to be evaluating. But most importantly, I think things to think of, as we've had more meetings within our district, even it's become apparent, we need to make sure that we're keeping ourselves muted unless we're talking, so that there's not a lot of background noise. I think we're all probably at home. I know I'm at home and my lovely dog has woke up, and in the past he has enjoyed barking in the background. So I myself will be muted unless I need to speak, so that everyone doesn't enjoy his communication with the people walking down the street. So given that, let's start with the approval of the minutes. If everyone's had a chance to look at the minutes, we can entertain a motion to approve if there aren't any questions.
Commissioner Seiss, motion to approve the minutes.
Commissioner Seiss approved motion. Can I have a second?
Second.
And can you tell us who you are when you speak? Sorry, I should have said that. Whoever just seconded, I need to know which commissioner it was.
Commissioner Roughton, second.
So Commissioner Roughton, second. And all in favor, say, Dr. Fair, do you want us to say yes, or do you want to just go through the roll call?
It's up to you.
I think if you just state your name and then say yes. So Commissioner Linker, yes.
Commissioner Roughton,
Seiss,
yes.
Commissioner Cook, yes.
Commissioner Austin, yes. And can we just raise our hands for things like this?
I don't have a hand on mine for some reason.
You're panelists, so you do not have a hand.
Yeah.
We've all been muted now. That's not.
So Perry, we hear you talking. Can you officially say your name?
Commissioner Perry, yes.
Commissioner. Commissioner Mills, can you?
Commissioner
I
Mills,
see your
yes.
mic. Commissioner Goodette, you're probably going to have to respond in the text box.
He said yes.
Commissioner Coggins.
Okay, Commissioner Coggins.
Can you repeat what we're discussing? I actually stepped out once we decided we didn't have quorum. We all agreed that what was going on.
Sorry, Commissioner Coggins. This is Commissioner Linker. We had a commissioner hop on, so that made 12.
Okay.
So we're just accepting the minutes. If you want a second to look at them.
I've looked over them. I agree. I approve.
So if I'm keeping up, that's Commissioner Autry, if you can't speak, if we can't hear you, if you can indicate in the chat box if you haven't done so already. And Commissioner Parker. I do have Commissioner Flowers in the chat box as accepting. And I believe we heard from Commissioner Cook, but if we didn't, she's also indicated she's accepting. That's 10. I haven't heard from Commissioner Autry and Commissioner Parker.
Commissioner Parker, approve the minutes, yes.
Commissioner Linker, did you see the message from Commissioner Mills? And if they're leaving at 10, take your quorum down.
Okay. I've got 11 yeses. I'm not sure if Autry's trying to text or not, because I know she's been doing some texting and it's going to Dr. Fair, not where everyone can see. I think we go until we stop. I don't know how much we'll get accomplished. For those of you that don't see, we have 2 commission members that have indicated that they have a meeting. They'll have to hop off at 10, and if they hop off at 10, then we have 10 members, and we wouldn't have quorum. I'd like to say we just go ahead and go with it, because I do know there's a couple that might hop on, and at the time that the Commissioner Mills and Commissioner Perry have to leave, we'll just do roll call at that point. Does that sound okay, Dr. Fair? If we just go, and then if they indicate when they're leaving, we can do a quick roll call and see if we have any new members in, or you can let us know if any new members come in.
Yes, that would be fine.
And I do have a yes for Autry and a yes for Gadet texted. So we will continue with the agenda. So we'll start, the bulk of this meeting is going to be basically the DPI consultants from the division for math 912, for CTE, for EC, and for EL. With the presentation, we have some slides. They're going to provide us with some information. And you have the that in the agenda. I'm going to really jump in with something about the subcommittee update, just in case we do have to end. Just an update for the subcommittee. We did meet virtually yesterday, briefly. We are working on individually on our finishing up our modules, and at the point that we finish, we're going to come back together in 2 weeks and meet. We will be pushing it out for peer review. So be looking for something from Dr. Fair with some access to how to access Canvas, the courses, and then your input in what it is before we push it, before we use it, like especially the advisor course. For there are 3 parents that are not also educators, and we are getting access to the Canvas for those 3. It is in process. It should be completed, and they should be able to log in within the next 2 weeks, and they'll be getting more information on that. So the courses are housed on DPI's Canvas. And so when we get to that point, you'll have access to the courses. So with that, we're ready to go to the content area. So Dr. Fair, if you want to introduce, or is the math consultants coming first?
Yes, ma'am. All right. So
Okay.
today you have with you Beverly Vance from the K-12 mathematics team at DPI. Okay, Beverly, are you ready?
I am ready. Thank you.
Welcome.
Good morning. I am Beverly Vance and Section Chief for K-12 Mathematics. And I'd like to thank you for your time and for providing the opportunity to share information pertaining to the development and implementation of the K-12 Mathematics Standard Course of Study. I would also like to thank the awesome K-12 mathematics team for their leadership in the development of these standards and the associated documents that I will share this morning. This information and the associated criteria sheets will greatly enhance the process of evaluating instructional resources during the 2020 textbook adoption cycle. Okay. So this morning, I will give you a brief backstory of the development of the implementation of the current K-12 standards, provide a more targeted information about the most recently adopted standards for the 4th level mathematics courses, and finish with an overview of the criteria sheets that will be used during the training with the advisors later this summer. And periodically, I'll pause and check for questions, okay? And Dr. Fair, if we can go back to that slide. Thank you. In 2010, North Carolina adopted the Common Core State Standards for Mathematics for grades K-8 and high school courses, Math 1, 2, and 3. All grade levels and high school course standards were revised with implementation at all levels by June of 2017. In August of 2019, the standards for the 4th level math courses were revised. And North Carolina never adopted 4th level Common Core state standards. Thus, all 4th level courses are 100% North Carolina developed. Okay, we can move forward. Okay. All courses were developed under the leadership of diverse writing teams. This slide shares all of the different areas that were represented by the writing team members, instructional coaches, curriculum directors, administrators, accountability staff. So we had a very diverse team for all levels, K-8, as well as our high school courses. So we wanted to assure the advisors as well as your commissioners that we have input from a wide variety of people in the development of the standards. Okay, we can move forward. Okay. Special attention will be given to the advisors for the new 4th level standards. Educators have not had an opportunity to teach the new standards. However, we have engaged educators throughout the development process in preparation for implementation during the 2020-21 school year. So I'll stop and ask if you have any questions about either our backstory or any information that you might need for our 4th level courses. Throughout the presentation, you will find links to these standards. Okay, if no questions, we'll move forward. Okay, and you can just click through all of that, okay? Okay. All of the original 4th level courses were written with goals and objectives, and the new revised courses are written as standards and objectives using the revised Bloom's taxonomy as a framework. Many of the standards in the past were written with multiple parts and then rewritten using bullets to make the expectations clear and concise. During the development of the new courses, language was incorporated to add clarity of the expectations, and some of the examples from the previous standards were removed to make sure that we have clarity, and some of that information was placed in our support documents. This information is being shared with our advisors to make sure that they can see the difference between the Common Core standards and what we currently have. This slide will give you access to our new 4th level courses. If you click on the links, it will take you there. We will provide more training to anyone that needs revised Bloom's taxonomy training, which is associated with our 4th level courses, but not associated with the other courses, K-8 and Math 1, 2, and 3. Okay, we can move forward. Okay. That professional development is going to be a blended approach of virtual and face-to-face. Now, this was written pre-corona, so let's keep that in mind. But these were our plans prior to that. And anything that we have developed, we will share that with our advisors to bring them up to speed on our 4th level mathematics courses, because they have not taught these standards yet. And we do know that they're going to need a little bit more support in getting a clear vision on these standards. Okay, we can move forward. Okay. And so now we'll move into providing information on the criteria sheets. If we have no questions about our backstory or our 4th level math courses, we can move into the criteria sheets, in which we are going to focus on the content, the pedagogy, and accessibility. Okay. And the first part of our criteria sheets focused on content. Part 1 ensures that all approved instructional materials align to a minimum of 80% of the content standards. Also, the content, methodology, and instructional levels and in teaching strategies are going to be consistent with the philosophy, the values, and goals of the North Carolina Standard Course of Study for Mathematics 912. So our criteria sheets will provide language that's going to make sure we have 80% alignment. Okay, moving forward. In order to achieve that, we have provided support documents that's going to give our educators a better idea of what our standards, the language of our standards. We have a standards comparison document, which is very important that they see how the standards have changed from the previous version into our current version. We also have a document that speaks explicitly to the major revisions. This is going to be very helpful. Sometimes our publishers, because they are writing to many state standards, the nuances of the changes really have to be made explicit, and that's what the major revisions document is going to share. And then we have 2 very important documents that I'm going to spend a little more time talking about, and that's our unpacking documents and our vertical progressions document. Okay, can move forward. The unpacking documents provide more clarification for each of the standards. And what we have found for most of our educators that has been very helpful is the example, a sample task. And while educators will not look for these exact sample tasks in any resource, it does clarify for our educators and our advisors that are reviewing instructional resources the intent of each of those standards and clarification objectives. Okay, we can move forward. The vertical progressions document. This is a document that was developed to show educators how the major strands build across the 912 standard course of study. While many of the strands begin K-8 and the high school courses Math 1, 2, and 3, the strands become more sophisticated within each of the 4th level courses. This will assist educators with ensuring that all resources cover the strands in a manner that's consistent with the criteria to meet that 80% alignment. Even though the topics may appear sometimes in an instructional resource in 8th grade, and then in math 1 or 2, what we're really looking for is to make sure these strands appear in a more sophisticated level when it's repeated at a higher grade level. So this chart at a glance gives our educators and our advisors a look at where these standards, these strands are going to come in, but it also gives them an idea of where they drop off, where it becomes less appropriate at a grade level to have a particular strand. They will have that as well. So that's going to ensure that true alignment of at least 80%. Okay, any questions? Okay, hearing none, we may proceed. Okay. Part 2 pertains to pedagogy. In this section, we are going to make sure that it establishes the criteria to evaluate how well the instructional resources enable teachers to effectively interact with students and the social and intellectual environment teachers seek to establish. This section evaluates a resource's ability to impact content and culture, a growth mindset versus a deficit mindset. We are looking for increasing and building on what students already know versus introducing a lot of minute little details that assumes kids have no background on anything. So teachers are going to be looking for that, and they'll be guided by each of the statements that's going to appear in this particular section. Okay, we may move forward. Okay, in order to help our educators with that, our K-12 mathematics Google site has lots of resources. This hub is going to provide a repository where teachers can either go directly to the standards or look at tools and resources that will help them clarify some things that they need to use if they don't see how teaching a particular strategy at one grade might be different from another grade. This is a one-stop place for them to get to resources in a quick manner. Okay. All right. And again, this vertical progression document can be useful in that as well. It's going to make sure, again, that teachers can see at a glance where the rigor should be increasing instead of constantly repeating the same types of instructional activities simply because a strand has been identified as being at both Math 1 and Math 3. That strand may appear, but we don't want it taught at the same level. Okay. Can move forward. If a document should make it past.
Hold on one second. I'm sorry. I thought we'd pause and I could jump in real quick.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go right on.
This is Commissioner Linker, and it is 10 o'clock. I think the two that have to pop off have indicated that it will be no longer than 15 minutes. So is it possible that we take a 15-minute break and let them go do their check-in at their, because they're at school, they need to go to a meeting to be present and then come back. Would it be okay with you, Dr. Vance, if we just pause for 15 minutes and have like a break and then come back and pick up with the criteria sheet?
Oh, sure. You may, I'll be right here, and if someone will alert me, we'll start right here at number 3, but I'm not sure what the individuals that will come after me have to do, but I'm fine.
Dr. Fair, does that sound like a plan? Because otherwise we'll have to stop if they pop out.
Yes, what she's saying is that we need to check with the other consultants. So Dolores and Beverly and Ivana and Zadley. Are you all going to be available later than the time that you were originally given if we take a break?
Yes. Carmel, this is Dolores. I will have a hard stop at noon. So anything between now and noon will work for me.
Okay. Ivana and Beverly, are you all on?
Beverly said indicates in the chat that she's okay.
Okay.
And this is
So
Angela LeMay. I'm with Dolores. I'm available until noon.
Okay.
Till noon. Okay. So let's just take a 15-minute break. Everybody plan to be back. We will have to do roll call. So, I mean, 15 minutes from now is 10:17. I would be back at 10:15. So you're ready to go for the roll call. Because we'd have to have 12 names at that time to proceed with the meeting. So at this point, we're just going to take a 15-minute break. Everybody mute yourself, go grab your cup of coffee or whatever. Be back by 10:15 to start at 10:17.
Sounds good.
This is Commissioner Linker. Dr. Fair, Commissioner Mills, and Commissioner Perry have indicated if they could have 5 more minutes. So we will take roll call at 10:25. Otherwise, at this point, we don't have quorum and we would have to end. So we're going to continue the break till 10:25. Commissioner Perry are on their way back to their computers. So we can go ahead and start the recording if you haven't already.
It's recording.
Okay, and everyone be prepared because we will start the roll call. So at this time, if you want to start the roll call, and if they're not back yet, we can skip over and come back to them. But I do think they're online now.
Okay. Commissioner Laura Austin.
Commissioner Austin here.
Commissioner Jody Autry. Just a reminder, she doesn't have her voice, so she's present in the chat pane.
Correct.
Commissioner Kelly Browning. Commissioner William Cheshire. Commissioner Edward Coggins.
Commissioner Coggins present.
Commissioner Hannah Cook.
Commissioner Cook present.
Commissioner Angela Flowers.
Commissioner Flowers present.
Commissioner Aubrey Gadet. Commissioner Aubrey Gadet. Okay, so Commissioner Gadet is typed into the questions pane that he's present. Commissioner Don Hester. Commissioner Hannah Jimenez. Commissioner Renee Kimball. Commissioner Kathleen Linker.
Commissioner Linker present.
Commissioner Susan Mills,
Commissioner Mills present.
Commissioner Lynn Moody, Commissioner Parker, Stephen Parker,
Commissioner Parker, present.
Commissioner Michelle Perry, Commissioner Kim Robertson, Commissioner Nardi Roughton,
Commissioner Roughton present.
Commissioner Lindsay Sice,
Commissioner Sice present.
Commissioner Rosalind Yaris. Okay, did Commissioner Michelle Perry join?
She indicated in the chat box that she's present.
Okay, so I have 12, is that correct?
Yes, that's what I have as well. So we're ready to continue. Dr. Vance, thank you for your patience, and we're ready to begin when you are.
Okay, we will finish up with the criteria sheets. We have covered the first two parts, and if a resource is successful with the first two parts, we will ask the advisors to go on and review the last part, part 3, accessibility. There are 5 areas within this section. It covers accuracy, appropriateness, scope, evaluation of teacher resources, and technology. This is a very special part of our criteria sheets, because this is where we make sure that if a student is capable of experiencing success in a mathematics class, we don't want the instructional materials to be at a level that's going to hamper that success. So we look for items to make sure that within the first section, accuracy, we want to make sure that the resources are free of any errors, make sure that it's factual and its representations of, make sure we have a good balance of cultural, ethnic, resource, and racial representations. Make sure that, if possible, that we have good representation of even handicapped students or instructions or teachers, but any type of representation that a student might identify with, we want to make sure that it's not a barrier within these resources. So when the advisors receive their training on this section, our trainer will go through each part to make sure that all areas are in compliance, and to make sure that in the end, and Dr. Berry, you can go to the next slide, that after going through all portions of the criteria sheet, that we're going to look for things that actually represent effective mathematics instruction. Again, make sure that it's accurate and error-free, that it promotes motivation for our students, that it's going to have a growth mindset and not deficit by eliciting a student's prior knowledge, that it's engaging, but in order to be engaging, we want students, anything that they are working with, to be welcoming and not a barrier. Make sure that we use modeling make sure it's going to go from more of a hands-on approach, and then moving to the algorithms, which is where we want to prevent them from plug and chug and just using a formula, but that they have a conceptual understanding of the relationships of those formulas, which is what the modeling will do. And then providing those opportunities for real reasoning and sense making in the classroom. And that's going to happen with our standards for mathematical practices, which is going to be at the top of all of our standards, And within our unpacking documents, teachers are going to get an example of how to thread those mathematical practices throughout their instructions. We're going to look for that in the instructional resources that they're going to be reviewing. So we want to have good representation and a good balance of all of this so that teachers will have resources that represent effective mathematical instruction. So those are the three main areas of the criteria sheets. Do you have any questions about the content or anything that I've presented so far? Okay, hearing
Yes,
none.
ma'am.
Okay.
I don't see any questions. I don't see any questions at this time.
Okay.
Good.
So we can move on to the next slide. And the remaining presentations will be from our EC evaluation and L evaluation. And Dr. Fair, I'm not sure if we have someone presenting on those.
We do. They will come after the CTE presentation.
Okay.
So,
all right. Then, yeah, that's all I have.
Okay. Thank you so much.
This is Commissioner Linker. Dr. Vance, can I ask you a quick question? If needed, because we do have about half of the commissioners not on, and we do have the slides and we will be looking at them between now and our next meeting, but if there are questions, would it be possible for either the commissioners to submit them to you guys in writing, or maybe have an opportunity for you to pop in the next time to wait to answer any personally, whichever works better for you.
Absolutely. And with the current situation, we anticipated that. So we'll respond in whichever way is most supportive for you in doing your job. If you want to send me an email, that's fine. Or at your next meeting, if you want me to chime in again, either way, just take your time and look through the resources, look through the criteria sheets, anything you have a question about, I'm more than happy to address. Okay?
We appreciate it. We appreciate your flexibility and taking unscheduled breaks for us too, and taking time out of your day. Thank you very much.
Okay, and I'm going to sign off now because I do have something else I need to get to, okay?
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. So next we would have the career and technical education presentation, and that will be done by team members from the CTE division. So would you please introduce yourselves?
Yes, I am Dolores Ali.
And this is Angela LeMay.
So good morning. Angela and I will be presenting today. Angela is a section chief. She manages proof of learning. I am also a section chief, and I manage the curriculum acquisition. She and I supervise the proof of learning and curriculum acquisition for an inventory of over 230 courses. We will share an overview of standards, proof of learning, and instructional criteria for the 6 listed program areas for which the over 200 courses are divided among 71 pathways. These program areas and pathways are managed by 14 program area consultants. Agricultural education is comprised of these pathways. Agricultural education provides systematic instruction to students in the areas of agriculture, food, and natural resources. Business, finance, and marketing education is comprised of these 11 pathways and the 5 on the next slide. Business, finance, and marketing provides students with meaningful instruction for and about business that encompass business skills and techniques and understanding of basic economics and understanding of making social economic decisions and producing goods and services to consumption and business attitudes essential to become globally engaged and productive citizens. Next. So next we have, if you go up one more, Carmela, back to, so for the computer science, and information technology education is comprised of these 12 pathways. Computer science and information technology is focused on building linkages in information technology occupations for entry-level, technical, and professional careers related to design, development, support, and management of hardware, software, multimedia, and systems integration services. Next. Family and consumer science education is comprised of these 10 pathways. Family consumer sciences provides the bridge needed by all students to deal with major societal issues such as work and family, healthcare, child and elder care, family and community violence and crime, global economics and politics, and technology usage. Health science education is comprised of these 4 pathways. Health science education provides a comprehensive program to meet present and projected needs of the healthcare industry. Trade, technology, engineering, and industrial education is comprised of 28 pathways, these 12 and the remaining 16 on the next couple of slides. Trade and technology, engineering, and industrial education programs provide students with the skills and conceptual knowledge needed for careers in industry, engineering, and design. So trade, technology, and engineering and industrial education is also comprised of these 12 pathways, as well as these last 4. Next. So this slide demonstrates an example of a pathway. As you can see, middle grade exploration on the left, pathway course at the top, which includes 2 sequential courses and work-based learning. The supplemental technical and supplemental employability skills course are denoted in the middle, along with the integrated career and technical student organization, which is also known as CTSOs. We appreciate the opportunity to provide an overview of how course standards comprise the essential standards, proof of learning, and instructional criteria. This information is intended to enrich the process of evaluating instructional materials for CTE. The Essential Standards document is an approved publication of all the CTE courses that allow public school units to select the appropriate courses for implementation. This document contains program area, course descriptions, credential, integrated CTSO, and aligned work-based learning. This is a sample of a course description, credential, integrated CTSO, and aligned work-based learning that will appear in the Essential Standards document published by CTE. This is an example that covers one of our many courses. On this slide, you will see all courses developed under the leadership of a consultant, one of the managing program consultant. A course acquisition schedule could depend on the age of a course, 3 to 5 years, enrollment, performance, or be brand new depending on the pathway need. And as you will see in the center of all this work will be the program consultant who would work with business and industry reps, a consortium, possibly program teachers, post-secondary educators, a credentialing entity, agency, CTE leadership, and other DPI divisions. Courses that are maintained by North Carolina CTE includes a course user guide. Each course user guide consists of a blueprint that provides guidance on the standard, appropriate verb, and cognitive process intended for the students to accomplish. For school year 2021, the North Carolina Essential Employability Skills, which are communication, ethics, problem solving, professionalism, resource management, and teamwork, are included to be developed along with the technical skills identified in the course standards. Instructional materials may include a curriculum guide or an online platform provided by an instructional partner. As you will see here, this is an example excerpt of a blueprint that provides guidance on the standard, appropriate verb, and cognitive process intended for students to accomplish. The cognitive behavior is based on the revised Bloom's taxonomy. The levels of behavior may include standards and indicators or objectives. At this time, Angela will share proof of learning.
Yes, thank you, Dolores. For the proof of learning in career and technical education, a proof of learning is known as one of the following. It's either an industry recognized credential, which covers 80% or more of the course content. These are highly recommended, but due to the expense associated with the implementation, those credentials are not required. However, they are highly recommended. PSUs may offer different credentialing opportunities, but those offerings are based on their local needs assessment. We also, as the proof of learning, evaluate students with an NC test, that is our CTE post-assessment, or a third-party assessment. That may come from our third-party vendors, such as Project Lead the Way, NAF, which is the National Academy Foundation, or SREB, the Southern Regional Educational Board. Additionally, for 2021, we are going to assess based on a performance-based measurement. This may be inclusive of a comprehensive course project. It may include a CTSO competitive event with a scoring rubric. Also, it could be a competency or skills checklist, or it could be a portfolio, artifacts collected throughout the course to possibly include various projects by standard and competency or skills, or inclusive of a skills checklist. On the next slide, you can see for 2021, these are a sampling of some of our courses and how they will be assessed and what status they're in. So we have, as Dolores mentioned earlier, we have around over 230 CTE courses. 67 of those will be assessed. The proof of learning will be the credentials. Additionally, 49 will demonstrate mastery based on an NC test or that CTE post-assessment. 81 are third-party assessments. 16 will be evaluated through the performance-based measurement. And then additionally, we have 23 that are identified as local assessments due to them being in pilot status.
Thank you, Angela. So I will continue and share the information from the criteria sheets. So from the criteria sheets, we are asking for compatibility, specific criteria for program area or pathway, general criteria, as well as technology. So part one of the criteria sheets ensures that all approved instructional materials align to a minimum of the essential standards and the content standards. Also, the content methodology, instructional levels, and teaching strategies are consistent with the course indicators or objectives. Also, there may be criteria listed to meet requirements for federal, state, and local levels, and credentials such as the FAA 14 CFR Part 107 pilot license. The course user guides includes the course standards as shared on the previous slide. The curriculum guide includes the unpacked content, instructional activities, and activities along with the aligned CTSO for the standards. For newer courses, the performance-based measurement will be included in the course guides. A course or program Moodle PLC may include collaboration space for teachers, course standards, and course instructional materials aligned to the course standards. An instructional partner may also provide a platform which will include the instructional materials such as course standards, modules, rubrics, or content material. Part 2 of the criteria sheet addresses a variety of activities that will allow teachers and students to effectively engage with the content to support the intended learning outcomes. These activities also include CTSO's work-based learning and the essential employability skills activities. Part 3 addresses accuracy, appropriateness, scope, and teacher resources, also just the teachers and students effectively engaging with the content to support the intended learning outcomes. Part 4 addresses accuracy, appropriateness, scope, and technical aspects so that students and teachers are definitely continue to be effectively engaging with the content and to support student learning outcomes. Okay, are there any questions?
This is Commissioner Linker. There are not any questions at this time in the chat box.
Okay, and so as shared by Beverly, we are available if folks need to submit questions by email or need for one of us to jump on the next meeting. Please let us know. We'll be happy to do so.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Ali. That was going to be my next question. Thank you for also being working with us as we work through the logistical issues.
Okay. And I appreciate the vision on Dr. Ali. I have to get there. Thank you.
Okay, this time we'll move forward to the next presentation, which is on exceptional children and English as a second language and the consideration for those. So I would ask for the presenters to please introduce themselves.
Okay, good morning. This is Beverly Caldwell. I will be presenting with, I know Ivana is on. I'm not sure if we need to toggle back and forth with the mute and the unmute just to keep the feedback down. What do you think, Carmela? Can we both be unmuted at the same time, or?
Be if you like, but if you want to proceed and then she can proceed, is that the way your slides are set up?
We have some parts that will be going back and forth, but Ivana has indicated in the chat box that she needs to be unmuted.
Okay, let me find her real quick. She must be in as a regular attendee. Let me see.
So I'm happy to leave us both unmuted the entire time. It would be easier than toggling back and forth unless we're, getting feedback or something. So just keep us posted.
Hi there. Yeah, I can certainly mute myself while you're talking. If you could go back to the first slide. No, Beverly, you want to introduce yourself, and I'll introduce myself too.
Okay. All right. So this is Beverly Caldwell. I'm an EC consultant with the Exceptional Children Division, and my area is intellectual disabilities and secondary education primarily.
If you could go back to the first slide. Both of our introduction pieces will be coming up in future slides, but we wanted to start with the first slide as we introduced ourselves, just to let you know that things are a little bit different this year. So I am Ivana Manthor Anderson, one of 3 ESL Title III consultants here at the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction. And each year, as Beverly and I, or Beverly and Zatley, have presented to the textbook commissions, we have found that a lot of the information we share is actually quite similar. Although there are some very specific differences between EC and ESL students and some specific differences between the requirements, many things are similar, and we found ourselves saying, oh, what she said, oh, these are similar. So we thought this year we'd try something new, and we look forward to hearing your feedback on that. We will be toggling back and forth at some places and just playing off of each other at other places. So at this point, I will mute myself and let Beverly talk a little bit about EC before I jump back in.
Okay, thank you, Ivana. All right, so I already introduced myself, so we can go on to the next one. Thank you. All right, this slide is representative of the 14 eligibility areas in North Carolina. And I'm going to have to take just a minute to apologize on the front end. Someone mentioned earlier that their dog was home with them, and my dog is home with me as well. He's been very good up until now, and now he wants to talk, as you can hear. So I think I might have to put him out in just a minute if that continues. Okay. All right. Let's see. I'm not hopeful that he's going to stop it. Thank you for your patience. So this slide is representative of the 14 EC eligibility areas in North Carolina. Each of these areas, when we have students eligible, we will see an extreme of students who may have more significant needs of support to the milder needs. And we also may see that they are eligible in another area, as in they may get. All right, I'm sorry. Can you hold on for a minute, and I will put. Okay, thank you for your patience. I'll give this a try again. So as I was saying, within these eligibility areas, we will find that students will have a variety of needs, some on the milder end and some on the more significant end, but they also have requirements or co-eligibilities possibly in other areas like English learners. They may also be English learners. They may also qualify for AIG. So sometimes we will see that it's not just this eligibility area that you see on the slide that we're really having to address when we provide instruction and supports for students. Okay, next slide. We are required to follow federal requirements, and I'm going to go over the EC related federal requirements, and then Ivana will talk to you in just a minute about the requirements that are related to her area of background. So you can see on this slide, this is just kind of a snapshot of what the expectation is for exceptional children that we really receive mandates from the Office of Special Education Programs, which is under the U.S. Department of Education. And so one of the things that they want states to focus on is that the expectation being that 99% of our exceptional children are instructed in and assessed on the same standards as their grade level peers. And for this reason, we really do need to offer them access to the grade level texts. And because they have exceptionalities, they will require accommodations and support. So we'll need to always be addressing that. And we'll talk about that as we get to the criteria sheets and as we go through some of the needs that EC and EL students require. Okay, next slide, please. So in addition to that, I mentioned 99%, and so we really need to talk a minute about the 1% that I left out of that 99% count. So as I said, for the 99%, we really are focusing on the same standards and the same assessments, but we do have a population of our more significant cognitive disabilities area, and this population of students will also be instructed on grade level standards, but they require a modified version and a modified assessment. So because they are instructed and their standards are aligned with grade level standards, they must also have access to the grade level textbooks. And in the case of our more significant cognitive disabilities, they may require more supports and accommodations in order to access this information. Okay, next slide, please. So one of our other federal requirements, and I've mentioned this word before, is accommodations. So we are required to provide instructional accommodations so that our students can fully participate in the general ed setting itself. So that includes accessing the buildings and accessing the content materials, the standards, things along that line. So you'll hear the word accommodations used a lot in speaking about EC populations. Okay, I think that moves on to Ivana, and I'll mute myself, Ivana, so that you won't get any background, but I will tell you, Walker quieted down just a little bit after I put him out.
Of course, that's how it works.
That's what I guess.
So you will see my contact information along with Sally Stocks. Right now, the way we are typically working within the DPI structure is that I am the representative for the western part of the state and Sally is working with the eastern part of the state. But both of us are available to answer questions as we work together on this process. You also have the bit.ly link to our website. So on the next slide, you'll see, similar to what Beverly was talking about, the federal requirements that are connected to our English learner students. So the Office of Civil Rights, as well as Title III of the Every Student Succeeds Act, impacts the work that we do. So some of the similarities: we must have meaningful participation in educational programs. That is something that is guaranteed by law. And then within the Title III specifically itself, we talk about ensuring that our English learners have the ability to obtain English language proficiency, and not just to obtain English language proficiency, but also that they have the ability to meet the same standards that our native English speaking students do as well. So everything that we talk about when we're looking at the criteria is how is it that these textbooks are going to be able to allow our students and our teachers to help the students actually meet the same standards that the native English speaking children are expected to meet within the curriculum. So on the next slide. So this information may be something you're aware of, and there may be a few things that are surprising to you. It shouldn't be a surprise that Spanish is our top language after English in the state of North Carolina. The next few languages tend to flip-flop back and forth, but right now our second largest language is Arabic, followed by Chinese, then Vietnamese, and Hindu or Urdu. And the Arabic and the Chinese from time to time tend to flip back and forth. But of course, Spanish is our largest second language. We just completed in October the 2019 EL headcount, which gave us a count of 128,060 students, which at this time is approximately 8% of our total student population. So when we are talking about the specific needs of English learners, that 8% can be spread out in very different ways across the state, depending on whether it's a large district, a small district, if it's a rural area that has a lot of students that have come into that area. Those percentages can be 50 to 60% in a particular school, but across the state it is 8%. All 116 of our LEAs have at least one English learner, and 150 of our charters do as well. So you can see how that 8% is distributed. It touches every one of our PLUs or LEAs. This is the part that sometimes surprises people, that 70% of our English learners are actually born in the United States. So when we look at our kindergarten students, a large majority of those English learners, the students that come in and fill out on their home language survey that language other than English is their predominant language, were actually born here in the United States and are US citizens. 30% are immigrants or recently arrived students. Those recently arrived students often come in at middle school or high school level with little to no English and sometimes little to no education, formal education. So when we're looking at textbooks and we're talking about these supports, we're not talking about a homogeneous group where all of our English learners are the same. Our English learners can come in at different ages. They can be born in the United States. They can be born outside of the United States with no educational background. They can come in also at a later age, maybe the children of professors at one of our universities, and they come in with a very high rigor in education, but low understanding of English language. And so we'll talk about that a little bit more in the next few slides. So when we're talking about English language development, and looking at the language versus the content. The language proficiency test that we give each year measures where a student is in their language associated with the content. When we talk about language proficiency, it is not the same as content proficiency. Content proficiency tells us what you know in that specific content. What we're working with so often with English language learners is how do we help a student show us content knowledge when they don't yet have the English. So if we go back to the student who came as a professor's child, has very high content knowledge in their own country and in their own language, but doesn't yet have the English to be able to show us that content knowledge. How do we as teachers and through our textbook materials help those students have the ability to show us their content knowledge within their limited English ability? Okay. So the English language development standards, just like the math standards, the CTE standards, we have standards in English language development. These standards appear a little differently than the standards you're used to seeing, but they are all tied to academic language. So when we look at the standards, social and instructional language is our standard 1. Standard 2 is the language of language arts. 3, the language of math. 4, the language of science. And 5, the language of social studies. And that piece, language of, is so important. Our English as a second language teachers are not teaching mathematics, language arts, science, social studies. They're teaching the language of, how to access not just the vocabulary, but also how to be able to use listening, speaking, reading, and writing within these content areas. So not only do the ESL teachers use these standards, but any teacher of an English language, of an ESL student or an English language learner should be using these standards to help focus on how to make the content comprehensible through specific language learning strategies. Next slide. So when we look at the English language development standards versus the content standards, you see exactly what I was saying. The ELD standards are focused on the language development, while the state standards are focused on the academic achievement. They're content-based, where our standards are language-based. Yes, they must work together, because in order to teach the language of the content, you have to be working with some content knowledge, but you can teach the language of math without actually teaching the mathematical functions themselves or working on a specific problem. Sometimes when we think about math, things that even cause native English speakers to have trouble is something is divided by or something goes into. Those little words are the language-based pieces that we would be focused on versus focusing on the actual content. The ELD standards are reflective of the various stages of language acquisition. So starting with a student who has little to no English proficiency yet, all the way up to someone who is as fluent as a native speaker, and looking at how do we help a student at any of those stages of language acquisition actually be able to understand and share their knowledge of the concept that they're working with within the content. And then within the ELD standards, there is the social and academic language content or context. Students need to be able to ask questions, raise their hand, go to the bathroom, be able to interact, as well as work with the content specific information. And then under the state content, you have the school's actual academic curriculum. So you see some similarities and yet differences there. And on the slide that she's just pulled up, you also will see some of the specific differences that we're going to highlight between EC and ESL. And since I'm talking, I'll just go ahead and say under ESL, one of the main differences you're going to see is the fact that we are asking for the ability to have, when applicable, native language supports built into the materials. So Beverly?
Okay. And for the exceptional children area, the specially designed instruction is going to be a key piece. This is something that is a federal requirement, and it does address teachers being able to provide specific instruction designed to meet the individual needs of the student in order for them to access the content and gain that understanding of the content information. And then another important difference is around the eligibility areas that I mentioned earlier. Some specific disability areas such as vision, hearing, and possibly intellectual may require specific things. Like for vision, our students may need to have a format change because they can't actually see the content, but they might be able to hear it. So we might need to offer a different mode. And then for the hearing, they may not hear what's being said when something's conveyed auditorily, but they will need to make sure that we're having a strong focus on the visual for them. So we have to take in some considerations for these different needs based on something that might be specific to their eligibility area. And I think we're going to talk a little bit more about some of these as we move through the slides as well. Okay, so I'll continue on with the universal design for learning. And Ivana, if you want to chime in, I'll just try to just unmute and chime in, that'll be fine. The universal design for learning, this is one of those areas that really does impact all students. It's not always necessarily the exceptional learners or the English as second language learners. So all students really benefit from the use of universal design for learning. And so it's just really, here we're just thinking about asking questions as you're looking at the textbooks and the materials, just making sure that as you're reviewing the textbook materials that you're seeing there are opportunities for flexibility for teachers so that they can implement multiple means of engagement, representation, action, and expression, the components that are associated with universal design for learning. And also if they contain any suggestions for strategies, maybe within the resource component of the textbooks, those kinds of things would be helpful to all teachers and all learners.
And I would just say with that last sentence, when we talk about remediation versus enhancement, when we're looking at English language learners, we really encourage people to focus on the enhancement concept. One of the resources that is at the end of these slides in the ESL section is a publication by the Carnegie Foundation that is called Double the Work. And it talks about the fact that no matter how fast our English learners are trying to close that gap, the native English speakers are not standing still waiting for them. So the English learners have to do double the work in order to catch up and close that achievement gap. So it's very helpful when there are strategies that are included in the textbook that help those English language learners be able to enhance their learning and try to close that achievement gap. Next slide. So here's an example of where there are a lot of similarities. We were able to sit down and look at our slides and say, you know, almost everything we're sharing right now, although the approach might be a little bit different, the actual content or what the textbook should do really is the same. So when you look at this bulleted list here, we talk about a variety of linguistic supports. You know, how does the textbook support within the framework? Is there a focus on not just vocabulary, but key vocabulary as well as the language functions? Is there the opportunity for visuals and technology? How is background built, especially when we think about our EL students and also our exceptional children? Their backgrounds might not be the same. They may not have had the same experiences that other students bring into the classroom. So how does the text help to build that background knowledge for the students who come with different background? And how does it promote that oral language development? How are students using the language themselves, not just listening? And the one bullet that was different here goes back to what we highlighted earlier, including native language supports. And of course, there are a variety of ways those native language supports can be included, whether it's a glossary with the vocabulary or whether there are other online options that help. We're not looking for things to be translated so that the student isn't learning English, but sometimes a short translation of a piece is helpful. So what are the ways that the textbooks might include native language? And again, going back to the fact that Spanish is our most predominant language, if other languages are not included, but Spanish is, then we always want to talk about the equitability and accessibility of that. But it does make sense in many cases that Spanish could possibly be the predominant language that is being included in a native language aspect. Anything else you'd like to say about those, Beverly?
No, I think you covered it very well. Thank you.
And this will be so much easier if we were face to face. This is our first time trying it, so thanks for bearing with us this week as we try to look at each other through the computers.
That's right. Yes,
take the next one?
If you want to go ahead and take this one, and I'll take the next one.
Okay, great. So looking at content access and accommodations. So we really wanted to make sure as we're going through this that we are focusing on textbooks should. So in this case, they should support the use of accommodations or modifications to enhance content knowledge. So one of the things we talked about is the use of terminology. When we talk about accommodations or modifications, sometimes words have slightly different meanings in our different contexts. So we wanted to include both words there as well as in the first bullet. In ESL, we use the word realia, which means concrete objects, real things. So how do the textbooks support the use of real things, not just a picture of something or a model of something, but real objects to make learning hands-on and realistic for our students? So how does it support manipulatives and those hands-on materials? We heard in the previous presentations from math and CTE about modeling, the importance of modeling. How do those textbooks support the modeling? And not only the modeling, but how are things supported within the modeling with that realia, with graphic organizers, and with technology. So a number of things there that we're looking for to be successful for our English learner students and our AC students with these supports for accommodations and modifications. Next slide.
Okay. And you can see by looking at this slide, the reason I said I'll take this one, because we did designate a couple of differences specific to EC. And so I wanted to kind of elaborate on those just a little bit. And again, we're looking at the textbooks and how they might support the accommodations and the modification requirements for students. We'll talk a little bit about differentiated instruction, I think in a couple of slides where we go over the specific areas of that. The authentic assessment tool and containing those is very helpful, because this allows our teachers to really look at how students apply what they've learned, and they're looking at connecting and reflecting and providing feedback. And so those are some things that our teachers will need to use in order to refine the instruction and make it appropriate for our students. And then I spoke a little bit about the specially designed instruction piece, a few slides that we've passed already. And this is something that is specific to EC particularly, and it is something that is required to be provided for students in order to address their individual learning needs. And then the alternate formats, I also spoke about that just a little bit earlier too, but it is very important that we have adaptability to meet the needs of students who may have vision, hearing, and cognitive disabilities. And as I think about other learners, we do need to think that this also helps other learners who have different learning styles, as in those who learn better when they read the content themselves, those who learn better by hearing the information. And so this piece is something that's very necessary for students who receive special education instruction and have IEPs, but it also will apply to other students within the classrooms and assist them in their learning as well. Okay, so I'll just, okay, I'll carry on, and then we'll we'll see, because I think we're going to get to the criteria sheets here in just a minute. So this next consideration is around the textbooks and supporting instructional strategies that allow the teachers to activate and bridge the prior knowledge and the experiences. And we found, I think, pretty much everything within this slide applied to both of our disciplines. And so that's why we don't have anything pulled out, you know, for the English learner or the EC area, because these all do apply. Accessing the authentic text, I know as we've had changes throughout the state with our ELA standards, this has been really a big, important piece for that area to focus on the authentic text. And then as we had discussion around that, we really did come to realize that the authentic text was important in all content areas for our students. And so we wanted to make sure that we kept that at the forefront. The metacognitive development piece is very important, and then higher order thinking skills, because we want students to be able to move along the progression of starting with the concrete piece and then moving on to higher order thinking and application, you know, all those sorts of things that are associated with the learning process. And then the contextualization piece is very important, building schema to enhance their understanding. I know Ivana spoke a little bit earlier about some of the ways that the understanding for English learners is important, and the components that are needed for that. So this is something that we also consider with our exceptional children, that we want to make sure that we are enhancing their understanding of the information, because ultimately we want them to be able to apply the information that they're learning. And so that's why it's really important that these pieces be in place. And then just the linguistic modality integration piece, that whole listening, speaking, reading, writing. We are looking at that across content areas with EC, and my thinking is that EL is probably looking at it in that same way across the content areas as well. Ivana, did you have anything you wanted to elaborate on or add as far as this slide?
You've done a great job, and I was just going to jump in with that last one, that the English language development standards always look at listening, speaking, reading, and writing, and so does the testing that we do. So it's been very exciting to watch the content areas coming more into alignment with that, and that being part of the content standards as well, including those cognitive conversations and including the listening and speaking along with the reading and writing. And so I think this is something that may have seemed a little foreign a few years ago when ESL was asking for it, but over the past few years has become sort of a standard part of any of our content areas. So
you can't see me, but I was nodding my head. So, okay. All right. So I think we're ready for the next. There we are. We're on the next slide. Okay. So I'll talk a little bit about differentiation and then chime in, Ivana, if you have something to add. So this is the piece I mentioned earlier that we talk a little bit more about as we move forward in the slides, but this is an area too that is important for all learners. This is not just an EC or an EL thing. This is all learners benefit from this. And on the slide, you'll just see how differentiation is broken down into the content, the process, the product, and the environment. And when we look specifically at textbooks, we're going to look and see that there are a couple of these that kind of jump out at you in terms of being something that would be appropriate to provide supports around within a textbook, and that would be the content and the process would be probably the most the ones that would jump out at us at first, because the environment is more the classroom setting, the location, that sort of thing. And so the teachers are going to have a little bit more say on that based on their environment. But the content of the textbooks, as we mentioned earlier about having some resources and the being able to allowing teachers to use the resources within textbooks to help expand on activities and ways that students can show that they understand content, and also ways that our teachers in terms of the process can set up flexible grouping and utilize the graphic organizers that we mentioned as necessary accommodations for a lot of our students in an earlier slide. So these are areas we just wanted to make sure we include, because while they are important for EC and EL, they are very important for all students. Ivana, did you have anything you had to say? I hope you all heard that Walker was very concerned that you understood this slide.
That's great. And
honestly, he was quiet the whole morning, and then suddenly, now that I'm talking, he's gotten so vocal.
That we're looking at process and product. Those are great places where we could be looking at the use of a student's native language, whether the textbook encourages within the flexible groupings that you might allow students that speak the same language to come together and speak, or that first language could be used as part of that work, as well as in the product, especially if you have students with a low proficiency level but a high understanding of the content. How can that native language be used in the product? So those are some places where you might find that aspect that's specific to English learners. All right, next slide. So the cultural diversity, really looking at how do textbooks reflect the students that we have in our classrooms. Do the characters in the textbook, do the topics, do the things that are being shared actually reflect who's in the room? So when we're looking at something like the register, when you're looking at the characters or who's in the books, do you always have certain nationalities in a more formal role or a less formal role? Looking at what kind of texts are being used, the genres, what are the topics? Are there topics that are all maybe specific to the United States or specific to the South? Are there topics that include other countries and other nationalities maybe within this country? What are those tasks and situations? And especially looking at the participants' identities and social roles. How are these things reflected in the textbooks? And again, this is something that maybe 5-10 years ago, people would have said, I can't believe we're talking about this, or we haven't thought about that. Whereas today we're seeing much more of this already built in. But this is a very important piece for our students to be able to see themselves, for our students to be able to see themselves in a positive light within that cultural diversity within our textbooks. Beverly, anything to add there?
Again, I was nodding my head as you were speaking on that topic, but yes, this is one that again is for all students to keep these features in mind within textbooks.
And also to realize that students that are EC may also be ESL. So you have that diversity as well.
Exactly.
All right, next slide.
Okay, so I think it's back to me. I'll go over in the next slides the EC evaluation criteria. And so this will kind of be a quick overview because I think as we go into the summer session, I don't really know how things are going to proceed with all the virus changes, but generally we go into a little more detail on this piece when we actually have the teachers present. So you'll probably notice we'll go through these a little more quickly for that reason. So this evaluation criteria for EC will have 11 items, and it is separated into like a yes/no format for consideration. And then there is space allowed for the participants and those who are actually doing the textbook review. They will have a place to add additional comments that they can support their yes and no answers in the comment section. Okay, next slide. So I'm going to go through the major headings of the document, and the first one is content. And I think what I ended up doing is kind of grouping these slides because they might have been kind of in multiple places. So what I did was I took over the next few slides, I put the primary area on the slide, and then I'll talk to you about what kinds of considerations are within the document. It's someplace within the document. So the first one is content, and just looking at grade appropriate, that it has varied cognitive levels and abilities and learning styles, because as I mentioned earlier, when we have our eligibility areas, we're going to have different needs among our students within those disability areas and different needs for support and for resources and things along that line. So we want to make sure that it is grade appropriate because we do need to be aligned with the grade level standards, but we also want to see that there are some variations allowable that our teachers can take and use. The relevancy is a very important piece because most of our students have great difficulty with generalizing skills and understanding the skills that are more abstract. So making it relevant so that they can connect it with something that is within their world and that sort of thing makes it easier for them to grasp the concepts. And so we do want the content to be relevant, to link to the prior knowledge, and to activate their engagement in what's going on. And then key concepts, the skills, the vocabulary, that those kinds of things are identified, they're developed, reviewed, and reinforced throughout, because what we're finding is vocabulary can be a very key instructional piece for our EC teachers. Just helping students understand the vocabulary will in turn help them in most cases understand the content. And it's also one of those key pieces that we focus on when we're teaching reading, is helping them to understand the vocabulary, to understand the context of what they're reading at that point in time. So the next slide, please, is on materials. And I'm sorry, this one is a little text heavy. I just tried to group it into one slide so that I wouldn't have to drag it out, but it is a little full. The materials would be focusing on including a variety of exercises and reviews and assessments and performance tasks. So having access to things that teachers can use to kind of switch things up in terms of the review and the assessments and the tasks at hand, providing opportunities for students to collect, organize, and interpret and to evaluate the information is another piece that's necessary for our EC world, including a summary of the content, the instruction, the objectives. Supplemental and background information is very helpful, because some of this again goes back to helping make it relevant to students when we can get that background information applied. And then anything that's supplemental to kind of give extra practice on skills is very helpful to the EC student as well. And then including guides like the contents, the glossary, the dictionary, any kind of footnotes or references, literature links, anything that can help support the student in a better understanding of the content, knowing where to find things, understanding the vocabulary in terms of having the dictionary, further explanation through footnotes, helps with that whole instructional piece and the understanding of the content for the student as well. And then including sufficient materials that are well organized and easy to use, comprehensive, and reasonably sized, because sometimes some of the materials can become very massive and then it becomes overwhelming. So that's one of the things we do find, that the reasonably sized is very important as well. Next slide, please. So this one is just a little bit more on materials, and this slide was at a specific request from our math content consultants, because as they are providing instruction and training for our teachers in the math area, there are a couple of things they really wanted us to be aware of, and they wanted to make sure that we were looking for these things within the text. And they're really around language again and supporting discourse about math. So they want us to make sure that we're looking for opportunities for two-way discussion and in-depth discussion about math. So it's not just about doing the procedures, but are there opportunities for students to talk about how they get to this point and how they can interpret what's involved with math, and not just focusing on a formula. I think Beverly Vance talked about that earlier, that it goes beyond just applying a formula. It's really talking through what we're trying to find out and what ways we can go about finding that piece out. And so that's very important to our math consultants. And then also including examples that foster in-depth understanding of math. They would like to really see that kind of thing evident throughout the text. So not just in spots, but this is something that the expectation is that's ongoing with instruction and supports for students. So looking for allowing students to have a more in-depth understanding of math, and not just not just the formulas and applying formulas. Okay, next slide. And then the sections here are around resources, text, and technology. For resources, it's really important that the resources accommodate our first-year teachers and our veteran teachers, because we're going to find that we have a lot on both ends there, and they're going to have very different needs. And so we want to make sure that there are resources that will help that first-year teacher with a better understanding, and then help that veteran teacher as, you know, she may be addressing, or he may be addressing at this time, some changing standards and some changing ways of thinking about things, and that they would need to access materials and resources as well to help them kind of change the thinking and the process and the new way of addressing standards, that sort of thing. And then the text, it's really important to be looking at the font, the coloring, the spacing, the legibility, the photos, the graphics, the captioning of things. We do find, particularly with our eligibility areas that I mentioned earlier, like we call them our sensory areas, and it's more the vision, the hearing areas. They particularly will have difficulty with font, coloring, spacing, and that sort of thing, especially if it's a student with a visual eligibility. Sometimes the photos, if a teacher goes to enlarge a photo, it may become so distorted in the enlarging of the photo that the student with the visual impairment is not going to get the same read on that picture as a student without a vision disability. So things along that line, just, you know, taking into consideration that we do have learners who need supports in just the text itself, and making it more visually appealing and more accessible to them. And if it's not at a point that they can access it as is, can they accommodate it to the degree that it won't be distorted for those who maybe need enlarging of the text and that sort of thing. And then technology, just having resources that reflect the accuracy, appropriateness, and the scope of the whole technology piece. And I know across the state, we do have technology standards that we address through the grades. And so we know we have some things in place along that line, but having our textbooks support technology, or the use of technology, as in for EC, the use of maybe a reader or having something that's available to students that could be online, and then we could have a text reader read it online. Those kinds of things, those technology links are very important for our exceptional children. Okay, and so the next slide is just a few resources to give a little bit more information about our disability areas and some of the needs, some more information about the specially designed instruction that I talked about before. There's a link to cast.org, which is specific to UDL, and then there are differentiated instruction resources that might be helpful to the textbook, the folks when they're actually doing the textbook reviews. So does anyone have any questions about that piece before we move on to Ivana and the criteria sheet for our English learners?
This is Commissioner Linker. I don't see any questions in the chat box, so I think we're probably good for now.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Beverly. So as I was listening, I was like, oh, there again, I could have stolen that last slide, because as she mentioned, we go a little less in depth in this section with you guys than we do when the teachers are actually there. And I didn't include that slide, but the last slide that she had, you know, talking about the resources and the text and the technology, that is all included in our sheet as well. There you go, with the resources for veteran or first year teachers, with the text, looking at that font, especially when we have students from languages that write in a non-alphabetic way. The font can really be a big difference, and the technology. And those are three places, again, where we in ESL would be looking for options for use of a student's first language, use of native language within some of those aspects of the technology and the resources especially. Okay, go ahead. Thank you for flipping back. So I might have to steal that slide and add it to mine as well.
Ivana, I was just thinking we'll make that change in our next iteration.
Yep. Awesome, thanks. So I hope that this is working for you guys. I think it's working well for us, not to just be repeating each other and saying what she said on some of these items, because especially when you're looking at the universal design, really that's what we're talking about. These things, that most of the things we're talking about are good for all students, and then there are just some things that drill down a little more specifically for our English language and our exceptional children. So for the English language criteria sheets, there are 12 items to be rated yes or no. And we do specifically ask that you support both the yes and the no answers. Why do you think it meets? Why do you not think it meets? To help guide that discussion. So in the next slide, talking about the content. Again, this one looks pretty much just like the EC one. Are things grade appropriate? Are there varied cognitive levels and abilities and learning styles? And we could make that even more specific for ESL and say, not only is it grade appropriate, but is it varied for the proficiency level that the student has in English? Linking to that prior knowledge. Once again, often our students come to the classroom with very different prior knowledge. So how do you create that background knowledge? How do you find a way to link something if that prior knowledge is very different? And then how do you activate that student's engagement? Looking at the concepts, the skills, the vocabulary. As Beverly mentioned, the vocabulary is extremely important. But once we've gotten to the vocabulary, we then have to figure out how to tie that vocabulary together. What are those supporting words? Looking at tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 words, not just looking at the vocabulary. How's it reviewed? How's it reinforced? And in this area, possibly, how is the native language actually being used? Next slide. Looking at the materials, we're not going to go through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, so you'll find they don't match exactly by number. We're being a little more general here. But do you have access to print and digital resources? And again, is there possibly the opportunity to access first language there? Are there directions that talk about whole group, small group? How do you extend these activities? Are there things embedded in these materials specific to English learners, looking at proficiency levels, looking at native language? And then how do the students actually get to interact in a way that makes sense with the multiple literacies? And going back to the conversation, the slide that Beverly had about having that two-way discourse between teachers and students, discourse between the students themselves. How is that discourse actually supported within the materials? Are students given things like sentence starters? Are they given maybe a word bank? Are they given things to support those conversations that they're having with each other? Okay, next slide. The differentiated instruction that we've already talked about, looking at the student's specific needs. So in the case of the ELs, those specific needs could be language specific. It could also be whether or not they've had structured education in the past. It could also be on a socio-emotional level if the student comes from a war-torn country. So how are these things being taken into consideration within those textbook materials? Is there a gradual advancement in the level of the language practice? So again, thinking about those levels, as well as the cognitive levels, the complexity of student engagement, those kinds of things. All right. So again, that's a real overview, high-level overview of those 12 pieces that are within the document. If you have specific questions about any of the articles in the document, please let us know. We did give you a list of resources. One is our ELD website. Another is the website for the WIDA standards. Those are the English Language Development Standards that were adopted by North Carolina as our standard course of study. I mentioned earlier the Double the Work, which talks about how our English learners have to actually learn more than 10 months worth of material in a 10-month period in order to ever catch up with our native English speakers, and therefore we can't be remediating them. We have to accelerate them. That will help with the understanding of that. We also have the EL Toolkit, which is provided by the Office of English Language Acquisition, which is part of the Federal Office of Education, chapters 4 and 5 specifically, as well as a newcomer toolkit, which talks about those students that may be coming new to the US that may have that interrupted formal education, information there that might be useful as well. And then my contact information as well as Satley's. And then if you go to the next slide, you guys may have seen this before. We'll give you a second to look at it. And then Beverly, if you want to speak to it and wrap it up.
Okay, yes. I think we started sharing this when this was shared with us a couple years ago, I think at our CCSSO gathering. And I think the importance of this one is you may have seen this slide with just the first two pictures when it was really focusing on switching the supports. So you can see in the first one where all the students had the same support. And then in the second photo, that one student who obviously could not see over the fence needed to be a little higher. And so that student was moved in a position of being higher so that he could see over the fence. And so they all are able now to see over the fence in the second picture. But then looking at the whole equity factor, that if we ensure that we have equity for all, then they all can enjoy watching that ball game, which is the representation in the last picture. So I think that's really what we're trying to convey here, is that we're really looking at equity for all. And as we've gone through our slides and we've shared various topics, there were several pieces that we mentioned. These are good for all students, and these are good for all students. So there are lots of pieces that are certainly good for all students. And then we wanted to just kind of make sure that you were aware of the ones that are going to be specific to EC and EL. So we do hope, as Ivana said, that this presentation where we did not repeat each other or say, yeah, just like she already said, was a little more helpful by combining and then maybe pointing out our differences, was a little more helpful to you in understanding the criteria sheets. So do you have anything else to add, Ivana? We want to thank you for your time, and I certainly want to thank you for your patience with Walker, because he just didn't want to be quiet today for whatever reason. I guess I'm not home with him usually, and he didn't know what to do with me here. But thank you all for your time. Ivana, anything else?
But I have loved presenting with you, Beverly. I think this makes more sense. We hope to hear back from you guys if it worked well for you as well. And there's our contact information. And thank you so much for your time.
This is Commissioner Linker. I don't see, again, any questions in the chat box, but as we asked the other two areas, if you, Beverly and Ivana, if y'all would be willing, if we decide that between now and April 17th, we need your presence to possibly answer any questions, is that a possibility? If not, we could, of course, send written questions for a response.
Absolutely. I can respond either way that works best for you all.
I agree.
Thank you for, again, for being flexible and adjusting schedules and working with us as we work through working from home like everybody else.
Yeah.
I will say, Walker.
Thanks so much.
What's that?
My dog Chief enjoyed Walker's input on the criteria sheets, and he shares his concerns.
Okay, great. I'll pass that along. Thank you, Ivana. I enjoyed presenting with you today as well.
Thanks, Beverly.
All right,
okay.
Carmela, back to you then.
All right, thank you all. Commissioner Linker.
Okay, so this Commissioner Linker, looking at the agenda, we talked about the subcommittee updates at the front, and so that just puts us to the part of just like next steps. So before I sum up, does anybody have any questions? In a few minutes, we will need motion to close and vote on that. So everybody will get ready in position to do that after I make a couple of general comments. So basically the next steps at this point is we do have our next meeting is virtual meeting April the 17th. The agendas and all that will be coming. We are planning as everything is going to occur. I know there's been some questions about that. So at this point, our position is we're going like everything's on schedule unless someone informs us otherwise. The next meeting will include some more information on the advisors that would have normally been covered in the content meeting. So that will be in the April meeting. You may look for some communication before then as we work out the specific details of the numbers that we're looking at as we try to start looking for advisors and what that process looks like for that evaluation week. And so the next meeting is probably going to be heavy and it's going to be virtual. So just make sure that if you have any questions that you chime in just as if we were meeting face to face so that we can help guide each other. Anybody have any questions or comments before I ask for a motion to adjourn? Okay, I don't see anything. So if I can have a motion to adjourn.
I make a motion to adjourn. Commissioner Mills.
Commissioner Coggins.
Commissioner Mills made and Commissioner Coggins seconded. I think for this part, Dr. Fair, we probably should just have everybody write in the comment box because I feel like there's still a handful of people that can't communicate verbally. Okay. If you just want to, is that easier for you, or do you want to do like a roll call, like go through the roll and say who approves and who doesn't?
Okay.
It's easier for you to
yeah, I think it would be easier for everyone if I just do the roll call. And then if
okay.
The chat or the questions for any who may have to answer that way. Well, can you do that? Okay.
Okay, that'll work. So Dr. Fair is going to go through the roll call and you can indicate if yes, you approve the adjournment or no, you want to continue the meeting. If you're unable to communicate through the audio, then you can type into the box. Just if you'll make sure that it's not just Dr. Fair that can see it, so that I can help give her information as she takes the role. All right, Dr. Fair.
All right. Commissioner Laura Austin.
Commissioner Austin approves the adjournment.
Commissioner Jody Autry.
Commissioner Autry had indicated in text that she approves. She's on her phone now.
Okay. Commissioner Browning and Cheshire were absent, so Commissioner Edward Coggins.
Commissioner Coggins approves.
Commissioner Hannah Cook. Commissioner Cook. Commissioner Angela Flowers.
Commissioner Flowers approves.
Commissioner Aubrey Gadet. Commissioners Hester, Jimenez, and Kimball were absent. Commissioner Kathleen Lincoln.
I'm sorry, Dr. Fair. Commissioner Hester did hop on at some point during the thing and has indicated that she approves the adjournment.
Okay.
So that would be Commissioner Hester does agree with adjourning.
Commissioner Hannah Jimenez. Commissioner Renee Kimball. Commissioner Kathleen Linker.
Commissioner Linker approved.
Commissioner Susan Mills.
Commissioner Mills approves.
Commissioner Lynn Moody. Commissioner Stephen Parker.
Commissioner Parker approves.
Commissioner Michelle Perry.
Commissioner Perry approves.
Commissioner Kim Robertson. Commissioner Nardi Rutan.
Commissioner Routner approves.
Commissioner Lindsay Sice.
Commissioner Sice approves.
Commissioner Rosalind Yaris. And did we pick back up?
And Commissioner Cook indicates that she stepped away, but she's present now.
Okay, so Commissioner Hannah Cook.
Commissioner Cook approves.
Okay, so that was from everyone.
Okay, so with that, we will end this meeting. Be on the lookout for communication from Dr. Fair. And as usual, be cognizant of any response that she needs, that it is given in a timely manner. And thank you for joining us. Bye for now.